We go to schools to get answers to our questions. But if school failed to ask the right questions about mental health, where do we go for answers? Hi, it's me again, Andrew, for my weekly videos discussing relevant issues for Gen Zs and Millennials. And I make blog posts and YouTube videos discussing the usual themes that they want to hear. The core pillars on this channel basically answers four questions. How can we improve ourselves? How can we better understand society? What exactly is going on inside our head? And how can we express ourselves creatively? And as you explore the answers to those questions, it is inevitable that you find yourselves arriving at an answer na nagda-directly respond to 2, 3, or all of the 4 questions I posted earlier. And that is the reason why one of the topics I usually talk about is mental health. Kasi yung topic na to, para maintindihan mo kung paano siya nakaka-apekto sa tao, kailangan mo rin tingnan how their life is, ano ba yung environment nila, and kung anong lens or perspective ba yung meron sila. And most likely, with regards to our mental health, hindi naman to basta-basta maintindihan. Because mental is not as obvious as physical health. Ako personally, I have to learn all of this on my own because these are things that were never extensively discussed in school. Keyword is extensively. Naalala ko naman, tinuro naman ng mental health, pinasadahan sa science class or sa MAPE, pero very surface level lang. They were taught to us for us to understand them in theory, but we were never educated in a way na ma-apply natin siya sa buhay. I even discussed in my earlier videos kung bakit ganun most likely, and my conclusion was there is a generational difference on how we appreciate mental health. The younger generation, and yung mga older people. At meron na-identify na 5 key lessons about mental health na hindi naturo sa school. So let's start with number 1, how mental health issues manifest really. And this goes both for mental illnesses and neurodevelopmental disorders. For sure naman sa class, maybe sa biology or dun sa M part ng MAPE class, yung meron may short chapter sa book, tinuro naman ang signs and symptoms of maybe depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, Asperger's, and the like. Naalala ko, nakabulat naman yon at dinidiscuss naman sa mga groupings. But what I felt necessary is to have a nuanced discussion on how these things really manifest. Some may be due to genetic factor, pregnancy experiences of the parent, whether in early childhood environment. And for things like depression and anxiety, ang causes nun ay stress in life. At hindi siya nangyayari in a snap of a finger na, boom, may depression ka na. I think we could have emphasized that some of this could be creeping up without us knowing it. And if you don't develop an awareness of the early signs, magugulat ka na lang na you are already in a low point of your depression. At di lang siya nangyayari when we're young. Adults are very vulnerable too. More so, these mental health issues, when they do manifest, it's possible that 2 or more simultaneously exist. There is such a thing as comorbidities of mental health issues, and I learned it with my own personal experience. When I got myself diagnosed with adult ADHD back in around 2016-2017, I was originally intending to have myself checked for depression. Because that's what I felt na yun yung sole reason kung bakit ko nararamdaman yung mga problems ko at that time. And after checking in with a mental health professional, the results showed that ADHD and depression are my comorbidities. In fact, my ADHD was making my depression worse. I didn't know any of this back in high school. Number 2, how exactly do we deal with this? So yeah, we run through examples of this maybe in our high school days, but what's the point of educating us if we will not be taught how these things could most likely impact us for real? And when they start affecting us, how do we handle such mental health issues? Tinuro ba sa atin ang step-by-step process? One proof of this is how most of us self-diagnose. Googling and researching online if the symptoms of certain conditions apply to us. At magugulat na lang tayo, lahat tayo may brain tumor. There was no fair warning of the dangers of self-diagnosing, that we could be totally wrong. And there was no proper education on how professional diagnoses really work. Here's what I found out when I was doing the push-up challenge last year, where every push-up, ginagawa ko siya ng mga short videos na merong mental health trivia. Whenever we feel unwell, physical or mental, the first one we should consult is a physician or a family doctor para ma-rule out if medical condition ba yung reason. Because sometimes what appears as symptoms of mental health issue could be related to other issues like hormonal changes, nutrition deficiency, or medication side effects. Pero if na-determine ng doctor na it's not, most likely it's a mental health issue, the physician could refer us to a psychologist who will then offer diagnosis and therapy. And if the psychologist feel na you need more intervention like medication, they can refer to a psychiatrist who are specialists who can do lab tests and provide prescriptions. Pero saan sila hanapin? Paano ba sila kukontakin? Magkano ba ang bayad? Ano ipapakita? We are totally clueless back then. Number 3, how do we talk about these? Aaminin ko, when I was very young, I was one of the kids who would use mongoloid, special child, or abnormal as pang-aasar or joke. As in, casually ginagamit na siya sa conversation with friends as derogatory terms. We acquire this kind of language because of how we see people with mental health issues as inferior or deviants in society. And the only reason why we have that perception is we do not understand these neurodevelopmental disorders. But more so, when someone opens up about their mental illnesses, how do we respond? Do we dismiss or doubt what they say na nag-iinarte lang sila? Or do we try our best to understand, ask thought-provoking questions, or direct them to those who are more qualified to address their concerns? When you think that someone you know might be experiencing mental illness or you think they have neurodevelopmental disorders, okay lang ba to casually say, "Uy, sa tingin ko, ganto ka." When you found out that someone is attending therapy, can you openly ask for the reason why, what the details are? The answers to these questions generally is no. We have to tread carefully and with full sensitivity whenever we encounter these topics. If you feel the need to ask the questions, think about why. You have to catch yourself. Bakit ka interested? Is it necessary to know about this private information that they did not voluntarily open up? Kasi if it's not going to affect your relationship naman, then better leave it for them to initiate the conversation. Number 4, how to cope. If you think about it, we're all dealing with mental health issues nowadays to varying degrees. And if this is such a rampant and pervasive thing, dapat din ganun tayo ka-equipped on how to deal with such things. Lahat na ng hacks sa physical education or PE classes tinuro sa atin about what our body needs. Exercise, proper diet, and good rest. Because these things were heavily emphasized na our body needs all of these things, and if na-neglect ito, magsasuffer ang katawan natin. Alam natin ang first aid process. Alam natin different styles of exercises. Even mga different kinds of diet, alam natin. So why weren't the different coping mechanisms for our brain taught to us? Yes, not everyone can afford therapy or not all issues demand medications right away. Pero coping mechanisms are such useful tools to mitigate the worst case scenario for our mental breakdowns. Sa dinabi-dami ng coping mechanisms na nakikita natin online nowadays sa social media, not one of them naturo sa atin properly or na-explain sa atin in school. Ano ba yung science behind it, on what exactly happens to our brain, and why exactly are they effective as coping mechanisms? And on the same breath, why didn't teachers tell us the unhealthy forms of coping mechanisms? Like substance abuse and self-medication. Sure, it helps us alleviate the feeling, but continuous consumption of, alcohol will result into an unhealthy lifestyle. Even yung binge eating na ginagawa natin when we're down, that is actually an unhealthy form of coping. And you have to ask yourself, what is that void you are feeling kaya ka nagko-consume ng maraming food to fill it in? Kasi once you identify kung ano yung big hole na yon, you could rather fill it up with appropriate, healthy coping mechanisms. Like, for example, talking to friends heart to heart. And number 5 is the role of our institutions, like school, state, and the family. In most of our younger years, especially no mga students pa tayo, we are governed with institutions. They set up spaces and rules para mag-govern tayo ng maayos. That's why we give them so much power because we trust them that they will be making decisions for us with our interest in mind. Pero kung titingnan natin, if you look back at our school setup back in our elementary and high school days, feel natin na tumakas sa clinic para magpahinga kasi masakit yung ulo. Whenever we feel physically unwell, we know who to consult and what questions will be asked by the school nurse. What about for our mental health? Yes, meron tayong guidance office, pero was it heavily emphasized to us that it can be called as a safe space? Tinuro ba sa atin yung extent of the sensitive topics that we can open to the guidance counselor? Were we even encouraged to try it na wag tayong mahiya, we can always talk about these things? For me, it was only there as a physical office and it was never really an inviting and nourishing safe space. Like for example, how had schools battled bullying or the abusive language used by students and teachers? Was the need for balance in studying and mental health breaks explained to us? And the same case for the different authorities governing us outside the school, primarily yung family and the state. Natuturo ba sa PTA meetings kung paano ba sisimulan ng mga parents yung difficult conversations to bridge the gap between the students who might be encountering mental health issues and the parents who never really knew how to initiate that sensitive talk? And for the state, do we know what we can expect from it? What are the laws in place or the institutions established to cater for our mental health needs? Di ba meron tayong mga public hospitals, meron tayong PhilHealth na pinasadahan naman sa araling panlipunan. But does it also factor in mental health? And if not, kung meron mang kulang sa system natin with regards to our mental health, paano natin siya i-roll out? Paano natin i-request the government to have these things? Based from how news were developing recently, it all relied on advocacy groups. If only there were more people in our population who fought for it, who asked for it, mas mabilis sana nating mapapaisa batas yung mga mental health related laws. If we look back on these 5 lessons, ang daming missed opportunities to educate us about this. Personally, mental health is something that I only got in my vocabulary mga around 2012 in my college days. I was already self-diagnosing about a possibility na baka may ADHD ako. And over time in the recent decade, lumalago na ang mental health conversation in the online space organically. It's like all of us started realizing, uy, depressed ka rin! Depressed ka rin! Oo, same, appear! Of course, I kid. But seriously, in the almost 2 years of lockdown that we have right now, I discussed in one video previously that the COVID-19 pandemic is also a global mental health crisis. Imagine nyo na lang, what if we entered into the lockdown na all of us are well-versed or na-warn tayo na maayos na if we stay indoors for a long period of time without any physical contact with friends, it will affect our mental health. Wouldn't we have fared better? Because right now, I'm surviving the pandemic with the coping mechanisms I already know. But what about those who never even realized that there is such a thing as coping mechanisms? This is why I asked on my IG and Facebook story kung natuturo na ba sa mga Gen Zs, mga mas nakakabata sa atin ngayon, yung mental health. Because the least thing that I would want is for them to experience what we experience, tayong mga millennials. And this, what I'm doing in a YouTube channel, is also my way to bridge the gap, to fill in the gap na nangyari on that period. Well, that is something that I can also discuss on future videos on ano na ba yung bago sa K-12 system. Kasama na ba yung mga lessons na to. Tune in for future videos like that. So please subscribe and like this video. This is actually part 1 of me discussing the first 5. Kalahati pa lang to. I actually identified 10 so far. The other 5 are complex issues, but even if they're complex, these are things that should have been taught in school nonetheless. Because the opportunity cost of not teaching them in school is eto, millennials in crisis. So if you have a hunch of what these other 5 are, or kung meron kang gusto talagang ma-emphasize na maituro sa school, do comment down below or private message me. I'll be happy to include that on my future video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you're coping well during this pandemic. And if you understand how coping mechanisms work, then maybe you could share it to other people so that they know. Thank you. Bye!